Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for taking the time today to meet with our finalists for the Vice President for Information Technology and our Chief Information Officer. As of course, all of you in Florida know, it's been a rainy, ugly day today, but Cathleen is joining us today. And from Michigan, of course, she has no idea if it's raining and pouring here in Florida. But for those of you who are here with me, I'm Paige Borden, the Associate Provost and Chief Analytics Officer, and I'm going to help facilitate this session. The Vice President for Information Technology and CIO is a key member of the university's leadership team and will provide executive leadership to the strategic vision for the institution's information technology infrastructure, assets, and services. This executive works collaboratively with the university community, including faculty and staff members and university leaders, to leverage technological innovations to support research and instruction while also improving administrative systems and business processes. This session is open to the campus community, including faculty, staff, and students, and we're using Zoom to facilitate the conversation. This session is meant to give you an opportunity to get to know Kathy and to ask questions and provide feedback to President Cartwright. To ask questions, of course, we'd like you to use the Q&A feature. This will allow you to both vote for questions that you see that you might be interested in hearing and allow us to highlight a series of different topics that Kathy can address. I'll be helping to facilitate that Q&A. Before we open the floor to questions from the audience, I prepared several questions that will extend to every candidate. Today's finalist is Kathy Curley. Kathy currently serves as the Chief Information Officer for the College of Literature, Science, and Arts at the University of Michigan. Kathy, thanks again for joining us today.
Great, thanks, Paige. It's an honor to be part of this process for University of Central Florida.
That's great. We're so excited to have you here. Your candidacy, we're eager to learn about you. So by way of introduction, can you please take a few minutes to tell us about yourself and why, at this point in your career, you're interested in becoming the Vice President for Information Technology and CIO here at UCF?
Absolutely. Thank you, Paige. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for taking time out today to be part of this process. I think it's really critical that there's opportunity for input and for participation in important university decisions. So a little bit about me. I have a liberal arts background, academic background, and that is in business and psychology. But I was drawn to the field of technology because of the nature of how project teams work. So one thing you'll get to know about me is that I'm a team first person. I have a passion for not just building great teams, but being part of great teams. And that's actually one of the reasons why I'm interested in taking this opportunity at the University of Central Florida. There's a new opportunity to be part of your university's new executive leadership team. And I think that's outstanding. And there's great opportunity in that. A little bit more about me. So I started my technology career across a couple of different types of organizations. I actually lived in Chicago for about 10 years and worked in IT consulting. I worked in digital marketing. And then I also have experience working for a software as a service startup company. We provided software services for the real estate industry, which was a little bit of a niche market. After working through all those jobs and opportunities, I'm actually from the state of Michigan originally, and it was time for me to come back to the home state. So from that perspective, I unexpectedly landed in higher ed at the University of Michigan. It wasn't necessarily an industry I had prior experience with. And I'll be frank, I thought I was just taking a job for a couple of years and then I would move on to something more interesting. But here I am 14 years later, extremely proud of the work I've done at the University of Michigan and also the amount of variety and change and challenge that technology in higher education has and the impact that it has. And for that is the second reason that I'm interested in this position at the University of Central Florida. You have an institution that is focused on innovation, on value, and impact. And I think those are three critical needs that higher education needs today. Students are expected to be ready, on the job ready and prepared the minute they're done with their higher education degree. And I think University of Central Florida is on the right path to be able to make that happen. I think traditional models of higher ed need to change, and it's great opportunity to be part of an institution that's newer, that is innovative, that's willing to change and adjust, and that finds value in partnerships across industries and with others to support research and teaching and learning. And so I'm very excited about this opportunity at the University of Central Florida, and I'm anxious to hear more of questions that you might have for me.
Well, that's great. You actually just mentioned three of the most important ones related to higher ed, of course. But so the next question leads straight into that. Can you describe your vision on how IT actually contributes to creating a state-of-the-art research, teaching, and learning environment at a complex major research university? And how, in your position, do you think that UCF can distinguish itself in this area?
Thank you, Paige. Great question. So I think there's several things. I mean, first of all, there's three aspects of technology services that are really critical to a university, in my opinion. You need to have technology services that are operationally efficient and effective. That's piece number one. But you also need to have technology services that can be what I would describe as customer intimate. So meaning you have people and services that can work directly, in this case, maybe with faculty, to really support their independent research project. How do you help them get that next grant? How do you help them with that next innovation? You need to have this customer intimacy partnership that can really help advance research. The third piece is around innovation. And that can be done, again, in partnership with faculty, in partnership from a teaching perspective and a research perspective. I think all of the vast amount of information that universities have about their students, about their learning, all of that can be used to help advance student success. It can be used to help advance the student experience, and it can be used to help advance additional partnerships with industry, with vendors, and with alumni from a fundraising perspective. And so I think the critical piece, I'll just kind of circle back on this, technology services need to cover all three things: operationally excellent, customer intimacy, and innovation.
Well, you know, you're doing a great job feeding into each of my next questions. And the next one is actually about their customer service philosophy. So obviously you're talking about this customer service intimacy and the way in which you can partner to do that. But can you give me a sense for the kind of metrics that you also use to measure the success of the IT organization that you're leading at the moment, and how that philosophy maybe kind of pushes into those metrics and helps to define them?
Yep. Absolutely. Thank you, Paige. So within my college, we just finished over the last 2 years bringing together 4 different technology teams into one organization we call LSA Technology Services. And those 4 groups were managing service requests and support very differently. So we had multiple tools, multiple systems, and then therefore multiple structures about what was getting measured or not. And so the short of it was we didn't have any baseline, or we really had very few baseline metrics for me to know what things are broken and where do we need to focus our attention. So for us in our service maturity, we recently implemented a new service platform to be able to do that. And so now we have the ability to pay attention to things like, what is our response time? What is our amount of time to close? Where are the demands for more of our services? So for example, if you would have asked me 2 years ago what people needed, I probably would have answered very differently than what I know now based on the data, which says people actually want software. Requests for software are the #1 request we get currently in our organization. So some of the metrics we use to manage how efficient and effective are we from a service response and delivery perspective are time to close. So how long does it take us to close requests, as well as how long does it take us to respond? We have a goal of response within 4 hours, and that's an initial reach out, acknowledgement. We've received your request, and helping somebody understand the status of that. With our support platform, I certainly know this is probably not anything innovative, but prior to putting that in place, our customers had no idea when we were working on something for them or if we even received it. And so now we have a much better portal for them to be able to go to and see, okay, I see you've got these 3 requests from me. I understand the status of each one of these. And now I know what's going on. So we've come a long way. I know there's simple changes, but they have been really helpful and effective in our relationship with our faculty and our students and our staff.
That's great. Thank you very much. To all of our guests who are paying attention to the forum, could you please take a chance to fill out some of those Q&A questions, just as a reminder as we begin to wrap up some of the questions that I have for our candidate today. Next question, Kathy.
Yes.
The position, of course, is responsible for bringing together a more centralized IT organization that is deeply committed to supporting the academic mission of the university with a sharp focus on the operational excellence and service. Can you tell us about your experience in working with faculty, staff, and the heads of the various academic units and research units on your campus? How have you engaged them in developing plans to effectively involve and improve the quality of that learning environment?
Yep, absolutely. We have some recent examples as a result of even the pandemic. So this summer, I had a team that was working to try to solve a problem of enabling statistical software that we were licensed for within the university, but licensed for it on machines that were on campus. And we knew that for our largest class, stats 240 for us, we have over 1,800 students that take that course. And those 1,800 students were not all going to be on campus taking that course this fall. And every student has a different device. They have tablets, they have Macs, they have HP, Dell, Lenovo, you name it. So that issue got escalated. So my team was actually working on a pretty innovative way to host the software in a cloud environment. But when we quickly realized the amount of risk and the amount of students that were impacted, I talked with the faculty of these classes as well as the department administrative leads, and we had a discussion to better understand what was the barrier. Why couldn't we just buy the cloud software? And so after several discussions, I understood that this was going to be a better path if I could get funding to be able to provision this software from the cloud perspective. And so I advocated for those departments on their behalf to our college CFO, and we were able to get alignment and agreement and use of some of our CARES funding for that. In the end, the cloud software was way better than what we could have done by hosting it, because the cloud software had features for collaboration where faculty could provide specific feedback on assignments and on problems within the statistical package. And so now I have the next challenge, and that's finding the operating funding moving forward. But I think it was a good example of a lot of times problems can be solved. They just need to be raised and need to be brought up. So no problem with advocating and working with our departments and our faculty to understand what's needed and how that can provide value and help students. Paige, I'll add on to this if I've got some more time, if that's okay.
Please.
One of the other things I do on a regular basis is interact with all of our what we call chief administrators. These are the administrative leads across all of our 75 academic departments within our college. So I meet with them individually as well as in small groups to better understand where we have common needs and where we have important priorities. And so that's been extremely helpful. In our college, at least how we operate, is those department admins are really the partners with the faculty chairs. And so they tend to have an important role with our technology services organization to try to move things along faster as well. So there are times when I'll just take an issue to them, and I know that they'll get a quick check from their faculty chair and we'll be able to move forward. We have lots of stakeholder groups, in short, within the college. And so I'm very familiar and comfortable with finding the avenues and channels to be visible and to have discussions with those different groups.
Kathy, I know we've looked through your bio, but real quickly, could you just give us a sense for the size and the scope of your college? Obviously, people can look up a whole institution, but to understand what the LAS college really looks like and the equivalent.
Absolutely. So College of Literature, Science, and Arts is the largest of Michigan's 19 schools and colleges. So we have over 20,000 undergraduate and graduate students. We have 1,500 faculty members, so that includes tenure faculty, instructors, and graduate student instructors. We also have 1,000 staff members, and those people work across 75 academic departments and another 20 to 30 centers and institutes. So we have, I think, a pretty well depth and breadth of domains across our college.
Thank you for doing that. I appreciate it. We are starting to build up some Q&A questions, but I have one last standard question for you. So the position will play a critical role in the success of our enterprise-wide projects, including the implementation of a new enterprise resource planning system. Can you discuss your experience implementing, upgrading, or supporting ERP systems? How have you worked with the campus community to define what is enterprise-wide and to ensure that their needs are being met before, during, and after the implementation process has been completed?
Great. I'm just writing that down so I cover all of them.
You like long questions, so yes.
Okay. It's okay. So my experience with ERP is from multiple perspectives. The University of Michigan, we, like UCF, currently run PeopleSoft. And so when I was in central IT, in fact, one of my first assignments when I started there, I was a release manager on one of our upgrades. So I believe it was the HR system upgrade. And I had a very detailed responsibility there, and that was to plan out with the rest of the project team and staff what were all the very detailed migration steps for upgrading the different data integration and batch processes we had, as well as all of the access changes. And so I got my feet wet pretty quickly in terms of a very detailed role. From there, I think the next one we did was maybe a student upgrade, and I was a co-project manager for that effort, again, from an upgrade perspective. As I changed roles within Central IT and led our project and program management office, I then was part of our planning team on a new ERP system, or a new system for our development office, or our University Central Development Office. So we moved from a mainframe into a new product, and that was going to be a several $million effort with technology that wasn't yet proven. And so Michigan has had a history of sometimes taking a little bit of a risk with a vendor and a software product that's yet to be developed, so that we can influence and try to get that product to be developed under Michigan requirements. In that particular case, we recognize that given the importance of fundraising to the University of Michigan, as well to all schools, we really need to make sure that the decision and the amount of risk in the decision and the product was going to be successful. And so we actually took a slightly different strategy on that effort, and we paid the vendor to partner with us on a fit gap analysis. And so this was before we made our final decision that we were going to go forward with that vendor. And while certainly one could argue that spent a whole lot of time and money on fit gap, it was the right thing to do for us. It engaged the community and the business offices that would be impacted in a way that really helped prepare them for a change, whether it was that vendor or somebody else. It also helped us to understand what processes were going to work well with the new tool and what processes were not, and where we need to go back to the drawing board on process redesign. So that ended up being a very successful project, and I hired the project manager for that effort, actually, as well as, again, worked on the strategy and the overall design for that. I think for the question, well, one more thing. Before I left my role in Central IT, I was actually starting to partner with our administrative technology leader on Michigan's own strategy for moving off of PeopleSoft. And it's been about 2.5 years now, and I will share with you that not a lot of progress has been made there. These are hard projects, and as you know that, and these are not easy changes. And so I'll use that to segue into, I think, Paige, the second part of your question was, how do you, was it engage with the community before, during, and after?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. So before, absolutely, you need to create a lot of awareness and understanding, and understand where people's concerns and pain points are headed into one of these projects. I think developing a strong communication plan is really critical. I would expect that there would be people assigned to communications for the duration of the project, and they're going to need help. It's not all on the communication specialist, by the way. So it's going to take the sponsors. In this case, right, you have 3 co-sponsors, your provost, your CIO, and your, I think, new head of administration and finance. So it's a lot of work from everybody, but I think it can be done. And the more you engage and create opportunities for people to ask questions, to learn, to work through business process change, it can be very successful. From a sustaining perspective, and I shared this with some of the groups earlier today, part of an implementation project for ERP, must include work to define the transition to operations plan. This is one of the most critical parts, I think, of these projects that sometimes gets acknowledged, but often gets forgotten. And without that transition to operations plan, it makes it really hard to sustain some of these investments. So you do need to work through new mechanics, not just technically, but how is the business going to prioritize new features? How are they going to work with the campus beyond the initial go live and the excitement of go live? And there are lots of ways to do it. And I think part of it starts with making a conscious effort to plan that transition to operations as part of the implementation project.
Well, thank you. That completes all the questions I had for you. So now we're going to transition to Q&A. We've got a little bit of an active Q&A session going already with some nice upvotes. So in order to save you that time, I'll be reading you the questions just so you know what the questions come in as. And the first one that's received the highest upvotes, just so you know, is can you speak to your experience in cultivating communication and decision-making through IT governance in higher ed?
Yes. In my role as Executive Director for Strategy and Planning in Central IT, I was responsible for the operations of our university IT governance. Part of that responsibility included preparing for our IT Executive Committee meetings. Those meetings included the provost, they included the dean of the medical school, and also essentially head of our health system. They included the VP of research, and they included the CFO. And so to prepare for those meetings, I spent personal time with each one of those individuals in helping to understand, whatever the agenda was. Did they have concerns? Did they have questions? Where was their opinion or alignment on that particular topic? And so that's one approach that I think is really critical to make sure that communication is clear, that meetings are effective, especially at that level. You need to make sure when decisions are made, they can be made quickly and effectively and not linger on. And so that was one of the things that I was very involved with as part of our IT governance. Somewhat related to that, we also had the first ever for Michigan IT strategy, an IT strategic plan. And so I was part of that effort as well. And we needed our IT council to endorse that plan. And so part of that endorsement work, again, included myself going out, meeting with faculty leaders, meeting with deans, meeting with other people to not just collect input for the plan, but to also ensure that their alignment was there in support of the plan. And so that's all part of communication and change management and influencing and driving change.
Thank you. The next question focuses a little bit on auxiliary departments. So what it's asking specifically is, can you speak to your experience supporting auxiliary departments and chargeback models and making those departments profitable? UCF IT is made up of both enterprise IT and auxiliary funded operations.
Okay, great. Yes, Central IT at the University of Michigan actually has 8 different funding models for one organization, so it is complex. We went through an experience where we were actually doing something similar, I think, as UCF is, and that was migrating to some centralized services and going about a shared services approach. So part of that effort, we centralized the network services and security services and the majority of desktop services. Because Central IT had 8 different funding models, about half of the overall budget is auxiliary and half is general fund. As part of those 8 models, I spent some time working with our technology head of finance and others to try to decouple and simplify some of those funding models, because as you point out, not all auxiliary services are able to be not so much profitable, but at least break even in terms of what we're looking for to do there, of course. So I have a lot of experience in at least having a good understanding of the complexities of those models and how they exist. One of the things that's interesting, I think we see this a lot in higher ed, that traditional telephone services tend to be one of the auxiliary service models that ends up actually either losing money or it maybe makes money for you to do your other services. And so sometimes I've gone through actually a full costing effort, and we did use a vendor to help us with this. We fully costed all of our services across Central IT so that we could realign some of those funding models in order to either know, what services might we start divesting, but then what services needed funding model changes. I will acknowledge that at Michigan, really hard and difficult to change funding models. I think UCF actually is in a great position right now, given your whole university is going through a significant budget model change. And I think that that's a great opportunity to set a better sustainable budget for technology services on campus.
Well, we are very excited about the new one, and hopefully that doesn't turn into 8 all of a sudden. So yes, we'll be happy with 1. The next question asks, and it says, we all have work pet peeves. What's yours?
That is a fantastic question. I have not had that question in a long time. So, I think for me, here's my pet peeve. I value feedback, and I value working with people who are comfortable providing feedback, whether it's upwards in their organization, sideways, or across. And so one of my pet peeves is where if somebody has a complaint or a concern, if they don't raise it and they hang on to it too long and then it comes out in another way, that does kind of drive me crazy. So I really encourage an organization where people can be confident that it's okay to voice your opinion. It's more than okay. It's needed. If we're going to make changes, we need to understand and know where people are coming from and what's out there. And so feedback is a gift, and I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you for that. The next question, given your history in strategic planning and consolidation, how do you foresee the integration of the VP CIO role with the medical education program, research, and clinical enterprise?
Yeah, thank you. Great question. I will acknowledge trying to think about models across what I'll describe as academic campus versus health system, IT perhaps. This has been one of the stickier points that I've been part of over the last decade or so at the University of Michigan. And I think while there's absolutely opportunities for collaboration across two groups, there's also needs to be an understanding that if you're providing clinical care from kind of a health system and research perspective, the requirements are different. They just are. And it's important to acknowledge those things and to make sure that technology services can support the rules, the regulations, the compliance that's needed in that space. I think we've got very good relationships with our technology partners at our health system and our medical school. One of the challenges, though, our medical school has is that they feel like their faculty are caught in the middle. Their faculty are caught in the middle of being academic and working on the academic campus and also being asked to work clinically. And so when you provide technology services, it can get sticky for those people. And so I think it's really important to work together and start with that, to work together, to understand what the goals are, what the needs are, what the constraints are, and provide solutions that enable those faculty to be as productive, regardless as if they sit in a medical school or in business school.
The next question focuses a little bit more on the cloud services. So can you provide more information on your role in the cloud services migration efforts for the University of Michigan, including your participation in the cloud strategy and roadmap development?
Yes, thank you. First off, University of Michigan started with cloud services from a storage perspective. I think Box was actually one of our first strategic cloud software as a service partners after Google, by the way. We did move to Google or Gmail and the collaboration platform, which has been really beneficial across the board. So my role in our cloud services effort amplified a little bit more when I was executive director for strategy and planning. And part of my role was to partner with the 3 different cloud infrastructure as a service vendors. So in this case, we have Microsoft, Google for GCP, as well as Amazon AWS, and make sure that we had University of Michigan contracts to leverage those services and that those contracts were enabled in a way that could make sure that data would be protected. This was several years ago, and so I'm going to assume that it's a little bit easier to work through these contracts now. It did take, I'll be honest, quite a bit of time, a lot longer than we wanted it to. But having those contracts available to University of Michigan faculty members and staff been really critical. So that was step 1, creating the foundation, enabling the contracts. Step 2, and this gets more into the cloud roadmap. The central IT organization, we recognized that if we didn't get in front of trying to create a virtual cloud data center, we would quickly see a lot of redundancy on campus. We knew that every school and college technology group would be wanting to and would have a need to build a virtual data center in the cloud. But there are some things as part of doing that, like identity and access management, like security, that you wouldn't want to do them 19 times over. So we worked with our leadership team in central IT and with campus to get input on requirements. And we developed our cloud roadmap that would start with building out a virtual data center in one of the cloud infrastructure as a service platforms. At the time, be honest, right? The central IT staff was not experienced or skilled in these technologies or tools. And so the way we went about it was a little bit different. We decided to pull experts from across the organization for 6 weeks, put them in one room, which unfortunately with the pandemic, you could not do that. You'd have to do a virtual room right now. But we pulled them off of every other project they were on and had them focus entirely on planning out and prototyping our cloud virtual data center. And this was a hard effort, but it was a really fun effort for the staff who were involved. We made a lot of progress, and then we rotated people out. Not all at once. We needed to have some sustainability. So I think we rotated out about a third of the team, brought new people in, and every 6 to 8 weeks, we kept iterating on that progression. So really a fun effort. And I think I left at the time at the second iteration, and that's when I came over to the College of LSA. But really proud of that work and those activities and helping to advance the use of cloud infrastructure.
So there's a question in here. It says, can you speak to the position reclassifications mentioned in your resume? Were actual staff reclassified or were just the positions changed?
Both. Thank you. So I'll elaborate on that just a little bit. When I came to the College of Literature, Science, and the Arts, I'd mentioned that we were bringing together 4 different technology groups into one organization. And as part of that, it became clear to me that we had many people in the organization in position classifications that had never been reviewed for over 10 years. And so we started an effort that we call our career architecture, to put in a better roadmap and plan for staff in alignment with the university classifications, because we do have to work within that. But we set out a plan to define what are the classifications we're going to use in our new organization, what are the levels, and then we went through on an individual basis and did an assessment of, was this person in the right classification? If not, we made a recommendation. And for about, I got to think through this, I think about we reclassified 40% of our organization before the pandemic hit. And then we unfortunately had to put this effort on hold. Our university is currently in a classification freeze, hiring freeze, and salary freeze until at least the end of June. But we did reclassify about 40% of the people, and the majority of those people also received appropriate equity increases as well.
Okay. How about security challenges? What do you foresee higher education facing in the next several years?
Great question. I think there's a lot out there. We need to definitely invest more time in doing a better job of helping people be aware of cybersecurity. We've done a lot of this in our college. I think in fact, I've got my dean really well versed now on phishing emails and ransomware. And so she is doing a great job of immediately letting myself and our security team know when she gets those bogus emails. But I think it's hard. This is a space we have to stay on top of. And I think having a strategy to invest in products, especially right now with everybody working remote, we need endpoint protection. We need vulnerability scanning. We need to make sure that there are the use of security technologies and investments to try to help understand when attacks happen. Unfortunately, attacks are going to happen. I think the whole nature of cybersecurity now, you can't just function off of having a firewall. You can't, people get through the walls. It's too easy. And so the faster you can detect that something's happened and then work through the process to mitigate that, that's really the best way right now and in the future, I think, to be able to handle and respond to those situations. But I will say education is important. Cybersecurity is actually a shared responsibility, in my opinion. Certainly technology and IT have an important role in it, but one of our jobs is to help people understand how to appropriately use tools, software, and data. And that is part of our responsibility to help others understand that they have a shared responsibility in the protection of university assets and information.
Changing gears a little, UCF's beginning to build a centralized digital accessibility program. Can you talk about your experience with digital accessibility and how you might see this program tying into your role as the CIO?
Thank you for that question. So we're seeing this as well at Michigan. In fact, we are anticipating a new standard practice guide or policy on digital accessibility. My role in it has been to be an advocate, mostly for it, and to make sure that the web-based services that my team provides and puts out there are digitally accessible. So we have at least one staff member who we've, somewhat placed in a role to be our leader for at least website digital accessibility. But we also focus on accessibility from the classroom perspective. So it might not fully align to digital, but I think it's still an important part of accessibility. We've worked with our campus student center for students with disabilities to make sure that we've got proper audio in place, and also transcription services for students in classrooms. Now that's changed quickly as a result of the pandemic. The video conferencing tools now, fortunately, are starting to come to the table and do a better job with transcription. But I think on this one, there's a lot there that still needs to be done. But we are trying to chip away at it and make it more an important part of our service quality and service delivery standards.
Great, thank you. Sorry, next question came in. It's got it's got a couple of those technical things. I've heard of them, but that doesn't mean I know what they really mean. Can you speak to your experience addressing IT compliance requirements such as NIST 800, 171, and CMMCs?
All right, thank you for that. So I think my role, or at least in my roles, the NIST standard is embedded in our university security standards. So we've recently gotten, we actually sought our IT council through governance endorsement of our new SPG for security 3 years ago when I was part of the role in central IT. So that required partnership with myself and the CISO to make sure we work with all the units and how we would define the standards for the University of Michigan. University of Michigan, and I used this term earlier, we actually have a shared responsibility model for our information security. And so while we have compliance that is led by Central University Information Security, if there is a problem or something is out of compliance, then they're going to work with, the faculty member, the department, the school college, and if there exists school college technology service provider to work through that issue and work through lack of compliance. My experience so far in my college, I've got a really great team. I've got a couple members of our infrastructure team who are responsible for keeping our college and our services up to date on these things. And so I meet with them on a regular basis to assess where's our risk, what's our next set of security priorities, and how are we aligned and moving forward.
Thank you. The next one's a visioning question. So what do UCF leaders need to consider as we think about and plan for the IT landscape in the next 10 to 20 years?
A great question. I would say UCF leaders need to consider or maybe acknowledge that technology is not optional. Technology is the path forward for higher education and the delivery of teaching and learning and research. I think especially on the research side, this is going to be really interesting to see what happens, what innovation comes up. Research is going to be able to be conducted remotely in some cases. Now, of course, there's some types of research that it'll be hard to imagine that's the case. But I think 10 to 20 years, and we're really talking about visionary, right? If we look at actually, ironically, the entertainment industry, and we see how, if we've got any Marvel movie fans, we see in those Marvel movies how people are essentially reporting and reviewing data and information in 3D holographic images. I think that's going to happen. I really do. I think it's going to happen. And so we're going to see some pretty big, seed changes in terms of how people interact with information and how people interact with technology. On the medical side, there's already been work done. I think in Europe, there are companies who put chips in employees' wrists, right, in order to access buildings. So the possibilities are really endless. And I think go back to the start of the question, which is what should UCF leaders consider? The consideration is just an acknowledgement that more investment will be needed in technology in order to continue to have an institution be a leader in the higher education and research space.
That's great. And I would love to end on the visioning question, but we actually have a couple more minutes, so I want to get through a few more of these.
Great.
Based on your current knowledge of the UCF and UCF environment, both IT or otherwise, where do you see the challenges to being successful as the next CIO? This questioner also wanted to make sure that they said, really appreciate your time today as well.
Thank you very much. And I appreciate your question. I think one of the challenges that there's a lot of opportunity and a lot of change that I think UCF is trying to make at the same time. And I think most of the audience probably recognizes that as well. And so, you know, the challenge there in making change at the same time is how do we keep people engaged, excited, enthusiastic, and not worn out by it. I think especially with the pandemic, that creates another challenge on top of it. You know, I'm not fully versed in how the state of Florida is functioning, but you know, here in Michigan, it's been hard on people, right? People are at home trying to get their kids through K through 12 virtual school. My staff who have little kids, that's probably the hardest piece. People are trying to take care of parents and neighbors and relatives and try to take care of themselves. And so the amount of change that UCF needs to make and wants to make, I just think, you know, that's going to be a challenge, and we might have to put some intentional effort into thinking about how to help people cope and how to help people be okay and excited and stay enthused and stay interested in it.
Well, Kathy, we are running out of time, so we're supposed to finish within about 45 seconds, according to my clock. And I wanted to say thank you very much for being here today. For all of the attendees as part of the forum, I want to thank you for participating in today's session and to remind you to submit your feedback online at the ucf.edu leadership page under the Vice President for Information Technology and CIO search page. So Kathy, thank you again. It was a pleasure speaking with you, and good luck in the rest of your day.
Thank you so much. Have a great day, everybody.